Hello guys, good evening. I'm Jonathan and today I'm going to introduce you to Vygotsky's work, which is educational psychology. So it's basically a link between two concepts. On one hand we have education and on the other hand we have psychology issues or psychology terminologies. And let's start by saying that the name of the outstanding Soviet psychologist and scholar Lev Vygotsky is well known throughout the world. Nearly all his scientific works, books, articles, etc., have been published and reprinted many times in translation around the world. The 6 volumes of his collected works have been of especially great importance to the scientific community. There is also his remarkable book, Educational Psychology, a bridged course published in Moscow in 1926, but not reprinted for quite some time for purely ideological reasons, especially that it is not persuasive and even incongruous from a modern perspective. Okay, so it is only a preface about uh, education. I like to I'd like to start with pedagogics and psychology, the chapter one. Okay, so what is pedagogics? Pedagogics is the study of the education of the child. But what is education? It can be defined in any number of ways. We will use the definition given by Pavel Blonsky, the Soviet psychologist and educational reformer, who wrote that who wrote that education consists of a deliberate, organized, and prolonged effort to influence the development of an individual. So education is something that is deliberate because it comes from the reason, it comes from uh, the reflection, and it comes from something that organizes our concepts, and it gives a foundation to. But it's also an effort. I mean, it has effort comes from will, something that we desire, and it's important to notice. In pedagogics, as in the study of education, there is a need to establish clearly and precisely how this effort may be organized, what different forms it may take, what techniques it may utilize, and what direction it should assume. Our further goal is to understand what the laws are that govern the very development of the individual we intend to influence. Okay, so first of all, we need to understand the concept, and then by understanding the concept we can start the reflection of laws and the reflection of the government that can give us the development of the individual that we intend to influence. Accordingly, pedagogics encompasses, for all practical purposes, several entirely disparate domains of knowledge. On the one hand, since it has the responsibility of developing the child, it is a subfield of the biological natural sciences. On the other hand, since every form of education sets for itself particular ideas, goals, or norms, for that very reason it must deal with the philosophical or normative sciences. So that's why how we can address or how we can treat the concept of pedagogic. Necessarily, it has a philosophical reflection. On the other hand, it is based on the this developing of child, this developing of our psychology that ultimately is part of some biological studies. Hence, the never-ending controversy in pedagogy regarding the philosophical and biological aspects of the field. The methodology of the sciences establishes a fundamental distinction between sciences that study facts and sciences that establish norms. Just like the everlasting problem uh, that we have in this modern context, which means literally having the having two aspects of the human reality. On one hand, we have the science that tells everything about facts, and on the other hand, we have the knowledge that is all about mm, uh, norms, norms, laws. So pedagogy without question is at the boundary between these two types of sciences. However, facts in and of themselves cannot lead us to any sort of exact scientific conclusion regarding education, nor can norms give us any assurance that an ideal is truly realistic if it is not guided by facts. So the same, that is some, that is the lack of the useless concepts that need to be complemented what the other offers. If on one hand facts cannot lead us to any sort of exact scientific conclusions because facts are not connected, are, are not merely comprehended. Facts are only described, they're only described, they're only linked to what we understand without a profound reflection. Nor the norms give us any assurance without the content of facts. This is truly realistic if it is not guided by facts. Next, we can continue with Blonsky wrote that, however, even if it is an entirely original empirical science, pedagogics rests upon auxiliary science. It's important. Okay, what other sciences pedagogics rests, and we have social ethics, which defines the overall goals and problems of education, which is important. I just came from the ethics class, and it is quite important to know the goals and the concept of good and evil, or what is just or not, what is unfair or not, and, and what is liberty, what is freedom, what is truth. All of those concepts that concern ethics are so important here. So it's basically that ethics give us the goals or the final or ultimate goal uh, by which humankind might lead their lives. Now, however, here, which defines the overall goals and problems of education and psychology, together with physiology, which together define the tools for use in solving these problems. So, on one hand, we have physiology, and psychology. What is psychology? Psychology is all about mind processes, and mind, this dimension of mind. On the other hand, we have physiology, which means all our biological and material parts, our body, and how our body is part of this uh, world that we'll share with other living beings. So it's so important because they give us the tools, they give us the way we can conduct our lives and we can conduct our norms, of course, definitely. So we have the goals and we have the tools. Now, psychology. In the rigorous sense of the word, psychology denotes the science of the soul. This has been its definition from the very beginnings. So, psychology is the science of the soul. In the ancient world, ancient civilizations uh, established the soul as an important reality to talk about, to understand. And by doing so, we could lead our acts, and we also we could also lead our actions through a determined and organized uh, frame of actions that allow that allow us to know better what we are. So this is what has been the science of the soul. In man's primitive outlook, there was a distinction made between body and soul, which were understood as individual substances. The assumption was that man possessed a dualistic nature. The emergence of this viewpoint goes back to primitive times when man, having observed the phenomena of sleep, death, illness, and the like, became convinced that a double or a kind of soul dwelled within him. Yeah, it is just like what was the concept of a soul. The soul had the concept of something that is a motor of life and something that is beyond our body, that is not part of our body, but it is something that can be separated, can be uh, can be different for our body, and it comes from different phenomena, as it says, from sleep, from death, from illness, and the like. When you have these different ways of states of mind, some people can think, for example, there is a phantom, there is a ghost, so I saw a ghost, or I saw someone who was not himself. It must have been her soul, or it must have been his soul, which means we have a reality that is not our our whole body, but it's something that is beyond, and it's also mortal, because when people die, it means that people can understand what's happened to them apart from. So that's in psychology. That's why people believed in other realm. In other people believed in heaven, and that was a kind of soul. And to finish this up, and to wrap this up, in more developed forms of thought, this belief assumed the character of a conception of a soul that in primitive man's thinking recalled subtle physical substances like smoke or vapor. Yeah, just like the soul is related to some physical phenomena such as breath or vapor or smoke, and also it is associated with some animals that can represent soul or what its nature, such as a butterfly or a moth, or it could also be interpreted by a vapor or a ghost. So even the Russian word for soul, which is dusha, is in fact related to the word dusha, which denotes the ability to breathe. Yeah, it's the same. Dusha, which is disha. So when we think of these terms, and I'm thinking about Greek terms. For example, we have anima, which is in Latin, but it it, it is taken from the Greek root of uh, that, uh, pneuma, which is pneuma. Pneuma is also related to this air that we have when we breathe. You know, it's pneuma. And also we have other concepts related to our soul. Okay, now philosophers have studied the nature and properties of the soul and have raised any number of questions about it. For example, whether the soul is mortal or immortal, what might be the relation between the soul and the body, and what might be the essential nature and features of the substance of the soul, among others. This trend dominated psychology for quite a long time, and in all fairness, it may be referred to as metaphysical psychology, since it was always concerned with supersensible matter beyond our experience. As I said, so was considered in the realm of something that was metaphysics. Okay, we keep it until this point and then we can continue later. Okay, so see you and bye bye.